Do you know what could happen to our entire planet if the great glaciers of the polar regions completely disappear by the year 2040? Right now, at this very moment, something enormous is happening at the top and bottom of our world. Something that most people never see. Something that never shows up in our daily news. Something that is silent, but deadly. The great glaciers, the giant frozen rivers of ice that have been sitting peacefully across the Arctic, Antarctica, and Greenland for millions of years, are melting. And they are not melting slowly anymore. They are melting fast, faster than scientists ever thought possible, faster than our world is ready for. And the consequences of this melting are not something that will only affect people living near the poles. This is a story that will affect every single human being on this planet, every child, every city, every coastline, every life. But here is a question that should keep us all awake at night. If these glaciers have survived for millions of years through ice ages and warm periods, why are they disappearing so quickly right now? So today we are going to understand this story in detail. We are going to go back in time, look at what is happening right now in 2026, and look forward to the terrifying reality that is coming by 2040, if we do not wake up in time. To understand what is happening today, we need to go back, way back. For about 2.6 million years, our Earth has gone through something called ice ages. During these periods, massive sheets of ice covered huge parts of the planet. These ice sheets and glaciers became the frozen storage tanks of our world. They held fresh water. They reflected sunlight back into space. They kept our oceans cool. They balanced our entire climate system. Without them, our planet would have been a very different and much more dangerous place to live. For thousands of years, glaciers grew in the winter and shrank a little in the summer. But they always came back. They always recovered. That was the natural cycle of our world, a beautiful, balanced system. Then something changed. Around 150 years ago, humans began burning coal, oil, and gas in large amounts. We built factories, we created cars, we powered entire cities with fossil fuels. And as we did all of this, we released something invisible into the air, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. These gases act like a thick blanket around the Earth. They trap heat from the sun. And slowly, year by year, decade by decade, our planet began to warm up. At first, the warming was small, almost unnoticeable. But the glaciers noticed, and they began to respond. Scientists began studying glaciers closely in the early 1900s. They measured them, they tracked them, they took photographs year after year. And what they found over the following decades was deeply alarming. The glaciers were retreating. In the Alps of Europe, glaciers that had stood for thousands of years began pulling back. In the Himalayas of Asia, home to the largest concentration of glaciers outside the polar regions, the ice was thinning. In Alaska, entire glaciers that once stretched for miles started to shrink back like a frightened animal pulling away from danger. But the most dramatic changes were happening at the poles. In the Arctic, the sea ice that covers the North Pole every winter was shrinking with every passing year. In Greenland, an island covered by a massive ice sheet containing enough fresh water to raise global sea levels by over 7 meters, the melting was accelerating at a rate that shocked even the most experienced scientists. And in Antarctica, the coldest, most isolated place on Earth, ice shelves the size of entire countries were beginning to crack, splinter, and collapse into the Southern Ocean. By the year 2000, the warning signs were everywhere. Scientists were raising alarms, reports were being published, conferences were being held. But the world was not listening fast enough, and so the ice kept melting. By 2012, the Arctic experienced its lowest sea ice coverage ever recorded in human history. That single year broke every record scientists had ever measured. It was not just a warning, it was a message. And by 2020, new data showed something even more frightening. The rate of glacier melting had doubled compared to just 20 years earlier. What used to melt in a decade was now melting in 5 years. What used to melt in 5 years was now melting in 2. The frozen world was no longer sleeping. It was waking up, and it was doing so with a speed and a fury that our planet had never seen before in all of human history. We left off with a world that was waking up, a frozen world that had held itself together for millions of years, now beginning to fall apart. But that was just the beginning of the story, because what is happening right now, in the year 2026, is far more serious than most people realize. Let us talk about the science first, and let us keep it simple. When sunlight hits the Earth, 2 things can happen. It can be absorbed by the ground or the ocean, turning into heat. or it can be reflected back into space by something white and bright. Glaciers and ice sheets are nature's mirrors. They bounce sunlight back into space and keep our planet from overheating. Scientists call this the albedo effect. And for millions of years, this system worked perfectly. But here's the problem. When ice melts, it reveals dark ocean water or dark ground underneath. And dark surfaces do not reflect sunlight. They absorb it. So the more ice that melts, the more heat gets trapped, which causes more ice to melt, which traps even more heat. It is a cycle that feeds itself. Scientists call it a feedback loop. And once it gets going, it is incredibly difficult to stop. That feedback loop is now fully running, and it is running faster than any computer model ever predicted. In Greenland alone, scientists measuring the ice sheet in 2025 found that the island is losing ice at a rate of around 280 billion tons every single year. Let that number sink in for a moment. 280 billion tons, every year, gone, melted, flowing into the ocean, raising sea levels, changing the chemistry of the water, disrupting ocean currents that entire continents depend on for their weather and food supply. And Greenland is just one piece of the puzzle. In Antarctica, the situation is equally terrifying. The Thwaites Glacier, often called the Doomsday Glacier by scientists, is one of the largest and most unstable glaciers on Earth. It is roughly the size of the entire country of Great Britain, and it is melting from underneath. Warm ocean water is creeping beneath the glacier, eating away at its base, weakening it from the bottom up. Scientists have found massive cracks forming deep inside the glacier. Some researchers now believe that if the Thwaites Glacier collapses completely, it could trigger a chain reaction across Antarctica that raises global sea levels by up to 3 meters. Not over 1,000 years, potentially within our lifetime. 3 meters. Think about what that means. Cities like Mumbai, Dhaka, Miami, Jakarta, Shanghai, and Alexandria sit barely above sea level today. A rise of even 1 meter would push salt water into their streets, their homes, their drinking water sources. A rise of 3 meters would not just flood them, it would erase them from the map entirely. Hundreds of millions of people would have nowhere to go. The largest human migration in history would begin, not by choice, by force. But the consequences of glacier melting do not only come from rising seas, they come from rivers too. More than 2 billion people on this planet depend on glaciers for their fresh water. The great rivers of Asia, the Ganges, the Indus, the Yangtze, the Mekong, all begin as melting glaciers high in the Himalayas and Tibetan Plateau. These rivers feed the farmlands that grow food for more than half the world's population. They fill the reservoirs that supply drinking water to some of the most densely populated cities on Earth. Right now, in the short term, those rivers are actually carrying more water than before, because more ice is melting. But this is a dangerous illusion. It is like spending your savings account at a faster and faster rate. One day the account runs dry. And scientists now predict that if current melting rates continue, the glaciers feeding these rivers will lose between 50 and 80% of their volume by the year 2040. When that happens, those rivers will shrink. Some may stop flowing entirely during summer months. What happens then? Crops fail, animals die, people go thirsty, governments collapse, wars begin over water. This is not science fiction. This is the logical conclusion of the path we are already walking on. And the people suffering first are not the ones who caused this problem. In the small island nations of the Pacific, places like Tuvalu, Kiribati, and the Marshall Islands, entire communities are already preparing to abandon their homelands. The ocean is swallowing their beaches. Salt water is poisoning their soil. Their freshwater wells are contaminated. Children growing up on these islands today are being told, quietly and heartbreakingly, that by the time they are adults, their home may no longer exist. In the Arctic, indigenous communities who have lived on the ice and tundra for thousands of years are watching their entire way of life dissolve. The permafrost beneath their villages is thawing. Houses are sinking into the softening ground. Animals they have hunted for generations are disappearing. The knowledge passed down through hundreds of generations, knowledge about ice, about seasons, about survival, is becoming useless because the world those generations knew no longer exists. In the mountains of Peru and Bolivia, farmers who have always relied on glacial meltwater to irrigate their crops through the dry season are now staring at bare rocky peaks where glaciers used to stand. The water is gone. The crops are failing. Families that have farmed the same land for centuries are packing their belongings and walking away. This is not a future problem. This is happening right now, today, in 2026. And yet, the world's biggest polluters are still burning fossil fuels at nearly the same rate as before. Global carbon emissions in 2025 were still among the highest ever recorded. The gap between what countries have promised to do about climate change and what they are actually doing remains enormous. The ice does not care about promises. The ice does not wait for the next climate conference. The ice melts when it gets warm, and right now, it is very, very warm. As we move through 2026 and inch closer to the year 2030, which scientists have called the most critical decade in human climate history, one truth stands above everything else. The window to prevent the worst outcomes is not closing. It is almost closed. And yet it is not fully closed. Not yet. There is still a story of hope to tell. There are still choices to be made. There are still actions that can slow this down, reduce the damage, and protect the generations that come after us. But before we get to that hope, we need to face one more truth. We need to look directly at what the world could look like by the year 2040 if nothing changes. Because only when we truly understand what is at stake can we find the courage to act. We have traveled a long road in this story. We have looked back at how the frozen world was built over millions of years. We have seen how human activity began tearing it apart. We have watched with open eyes the real damage already happening to real people in real places right now in 2026. But there is one final chapter we must face together, and it is the most important one of all. What does the world look like by 2040 if we stay on the path we are on? The scientists are not guessing anymore. The data is clear, the models are consistent, and the picture they paint of 2040 is one that should shake every single person on this planet out of their comfort. By 2040, the Arctic Ocean is expected to experience its first completely ice-free summer. For the first time in millions of years, the North Pole will be open water during the warm months. There will be no ice, no reflection, just dark ocean absorbing every bit of heat the sun sends down. The feedback loop we talked about in part 2 will accelerate even further, and the temperature rise that follows will not stay in the Arctic. It will ripple outward across the entire planet. By 2040, scientists project that global sea levels could rise by an additional 20 to 30 centimeters compared to today. That may not sound like much, but combined with stronger storms and higher ocean surges, it is enough to make coastal flooding a regular event in cities that have never flooded before. Hundreds of millions of people living in low-lying coastal areas will face choices they never imagined having to make. Do we stay and risk our lives? Or do we leave everything behind and start over somewhere else? By 2040, the glaciers feeding Asia's great rivers will have lost so much of their volume that seasonal water shortages will begin affecting agriculture across South Asia and Southeast Asia. Food prices will rise. Hunger will increase. The pressure on governments and societies will build to a breaking point in regions that are already dealing with poverty, overcrowding, and political instability. By 2040, the permafrost across Siberia, Alaska, and northern Canada will continue to thaw at an accelerating rate. And as it thaws, it will release billions of tons of methane, a greenhouse gas far more powerful than carbon dioxide, directly into the atmosphere. This alone could push global temperatures beyond the tipping points that scientists have been warning about for decades. Once those tipping points are crossed, no amount of human effort can reverse the damage. The planet will enter a new state, a hotter, more violent, more unstable state that no civilization in human history has ever had to survive. This is the road we are on. But here is what we must remember, with every bit of strength and clarity we have. We are not passengers on this road. We built this road, and we can change direction. The solutions to this crisis are not secret. They are not waiting to be discovered. They exist right now, today, and they are ready to be used at the scale this moment demands. The world must move away from fossil fuels and shift to clean energy, solar, wind, and hydropower, at a speed that matches the urgency of the crisis. Countries that are still building new coal plants and oil pipelines in 2026 must face the truth that every ton of carbon they add to the atmosphere today is a direct investment in the destruction of tomorrow. Forests must be protected and restored on a massive scale. Trees absorb carbon dioxide. They cool the land. They protect water cycles. Ending deforestation and planting billions of new trees is one of the fastest and most affordable climate solutions available to us right now. Governments must stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry and redirect that money into clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and climate adaptation for the communities already being hit hardest. The people of Tuvalu, the farmers of Peru, the indigenous communities of the Arctic did not cause this crisis. They should not be paying for it with their homes and their lives. Cities must redesign themselves around people, not cars. Public transportation, electric vehicles, energy-efficient buildings, and green urban spaces are not luxury ideas. They are survival strategies for a warming world. And industries must be held accountable. The 100 largest companies in the world are responsible for over 70% of global carbon emissions. Real change requires real regulation, real consequences, real accountability at the top, not just gentle encouragement at the bottom. But beyond governments and corporations and policies, there is you. Every choice you make carries weight. The food you eat, the energy you use, the companies you support with your money, the politicians you vote for, the conversations you have with your family, your friends, and your community. None of these things are too small, because climate change was not created by one massive act. It was created by billions of small decisions made over many decades, and it will only be solved the same way. By billions of small decisions, but this time, better ones. The glaciers that are melting today took millions of years to form. We cannot bring them back in our lifetime. That is a loss we must grieve honestly. But we can slow the melting. We can protect what remains. We can give the next generation a planet that is damaged but still livable, still beautiful, still worth fighting for. The story of our glaciers is not just a story about ice. It is a story about who we are as a species. Are we the kind of beings who see a crisis coming and look away? Or are we the kind of beings who face hard truths, make difficult changes, and choose the future over convenience? History will answer that question, and history is being written right now. By all of us. Together. The ice is melting, the clock is running, but the story is not over. Not yet. So here's the question we leave you with today. What changes are you willing to make in your life to help slow down the melting, protect our glaciers, and give our planet a fighting chance? Tell us in the comments, because your voice matters, your choices matter, and this planet, the only home any of us have ever known, is worth every single effort we can give.